We all know Scooby-Doo is a famous franchise that has spawned several movies, series, toys, merchandise, and even video games. However, one vastly unknown Scooby-Doo series is the cancelled reboot that was supposed to air on Adult Swim. How do I know of this? Well, a friend and a neighbor of mine saw it and he recorded it, letting me see it. What happened regarding the reboot is one of the reasons why it was cancelled, amidst other reasons which I will get into later. I think that this will be for your great interest if you are a Scooby-Doo fan. My neighbor and I are both 16 and we go to the same high school and we both love Cartoon Network. His favorite show is Adventure Time and mine is Regular Show. He adored that show and never missed a single episode, recording every episode that he couldn't watch when it was originally aired so that he could watch it later. This is exactly how I came across the Scooby-Doo reboot. The following is my friend's description of how he came across the reboot and how it was. I was just laying in my room after a long day of school, ready to relax and watch some cartoons. It was Friday, and I planned on staying up late watching recorded Adventure Time episodes, and other shows as well. I decided to watch the episode I had set to record on Thursday since I had missed it. I went on my list of recorded shows and I chose Thursday's Adventure Time, and pressed play, and was ready to laugh and enjoy my favorite show. To my surprise, I wasn't met with Adventure Time, but rather an episode of Scooby-Doo. It was odd since the guide clearly said Adventure Time when it was set to record. But I thought it was a mistake in the guide and just shrugged it off. In fact, as I looked closer and closer at the episode, it wasn't an episode at all. It seemed to be an entire new Scooby-Doo show. I don't remember seeing any promos for a new Scooby-Doo series, so these things caught me by surprise. The intro was similar to Scooby-Doo, Where Are You's intro, except this one had a modern and better art style. Instead of saying Scooby-Doo, Where Are You, it simply said Scooby-Doo. The monsters had been replaced by new monsters I had never seen before, and they all looked legitimately horrifying. Once the intro ended, the actual episode began. It started with an outside view of a huge mansion at the end of the street, isolated from other middle-class houses in the same street. Many cars were parked outside the mansion, and the shot then panned to an inside view of the mansion, revealing a tour guide guiding a group of people around the mansion and telling them the mansion's story. He was telling them that a wealthy couple used to live in the mansion, but a neighbor who was envious of their wealth sneaked into their house one day and brutally murdered them with an axe. I found that use of the word murder odd since I don't ever recall Scooby-Doo ever using that word. However, Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated was a pretty dark show, so seeing this new Scooby-Doo series using the word murder wasn't that shocking. Anyway, as the tour guide kept telling the story, an odd figure could be seen slowly walking towards them from a nearby hallway. Once it was close enough, it was shocking. There stood a blood-drenched woman with gruesome slashes all over her body, a gouged out eye, a missing arm, and half her face didn't have any flesh, showing part of her skull. Honestly, what kind of sick fuck would put something like this on a kid show? Nonetheless, Scooby fucking Doo. I decided to keep watching since I wasn't really scared, just extremely confused. The tour guide turned around and his eyes widened, letting out a gasp as the corpse let out a blood-curdling shriek. The tour guide and the people on the tour quickly ran out, screaming in horror. The shot then faded to a view of the gang in the Mystery Machine. They were talking about how they planned to go and join the tour of the mansion, as Shaggy and Scooby were eating a large sandwich like usual. The Mystery Machine drove into a small town where the mansion was, and they entered the same street as before, eventually reaching the mansion and parking the car in front of it. They got out of the Mystery Machine, but they were greeted with an old man hammering a sign into the mansion gates, which read, "Tour closed." Fred frowned and asked why, and the old man told them all about the bloody ghost seen previously in the episode. At that moment, a disheveled-looking man walked into view and told the gang that the mansion was cursed. The old man hammering the gates glared at him and kept on with his work. The disheveled man told them all about the murder and that he was glad that the damn mansion was finally closed to the public. This was also odd, as I didn't expect swear words in a Scooby-Doo show at all. Anyway, once the old man finished telling the mansion's story, Fred looked at the gang and said, "Well, gang, looks like we have a mystery on our hands." The shot then faded into the gang in front of the mansion at night. Scooby and Shaggy were shaking like usual, scared out of their wits. Fred split up the gang like usual, and they entered the mansion, despite the signs seen before. The episode then focused on Shaggy and Scooby as they began walking around the mansion looking for clues, or, well, food. They eventually found the kitchen and then quickly went over to the fridge, opening it and being greeted with the horrifying sight. Inside the fridge lay the blood-soaked, decapitated head of a man staring at them with red eyes and a huge grin. Scooby and Shaggy scream in pure terror as they quickly run off from the kitchen, screaming out the others' names. It then cut to Fred, Daphne, and Velma, who are investigating what seemed to be a basement. Velma was about to open up a chest, thinking something contained clues, until an ear-piercing scream was heard. Velma jumped and turned as the three saw the blood-soaked woman from before, running towards them with a huge machete. Fred, Velma, and Daphne quickly ran out of the room, screaming. As they kept running, they bumped into Shaggy and Scooby, falling down into the floor and falling through a secret entrance. They landed in a small secret room with bodies. The room was filled with so many rotting bodies and so much blood on the walls, it was nauseating. The gang began shaking, legitimately scared and waiting for the ghost lady to leave. Eventually they didn't see or hear her footsteps, and they all crawled out of the room. The gang silently and stealthily sneaked into another room, trying to not get the ghost's attention. They sat down, panting, clearly trying to calm themselves down. Once they were calm enough, Fred shakingly spoke. Alright, gang. We need to make a plan. Somebody has to dress up like that ghost, and they're killing people. We need to find out who it is, capture them, and call the police. They all nodded in agreement, even Shaggy and Scooby. Fred began sketching out a plan and a trap. However, this didn't last long due to the ghost somehow finding them and barging into the room. The ghost quickly ran towards them again, and they all began running except Fred, who managed to bash a nearby vase into the ghost's head, knocking her out. They all stood in silence for a moment until Shaggy pulled out a rope, and they quickly wrapped it around the ghost, keeping her in place. Of course, I imagined what would happen next. The gang would call the police, and they would unmask the ghost, and probably reopen the tour. Well, this sort of happened. The gang did call the police, and once the police were there, it was unmasking time. Velma took off the mask to reveal the disheveled man from earlier all along. The gang was confused until the man smirked and glared at the cops. He began explaining everything. You're probably wondering why I did this, but I'd have to tell you all who I am first. I'm the one who killed that rich couple, those snobby fuckers, acting like they were better off than everybody else. They pissed me off. So I sneaked in here and killed them. After the police took the bodies and everything, I felt such a thrill. Killing them was wonderful. Then I decided to kill again, and again, and again. I was using the same mansion to hide the bodies, dressed up as a ghost to keep people away. And I would have gotten away with it more if it weren't for you meddling kids. The gang ignored him, and they told the police about the bodies as the shot faded into the disheveled man being dragged into the police car. Other policemen were seen taking out the bodies from the mansion in the background. Fred spoke again, being way more calm now than before. Well, gang, seems like this is the end of that. I think we should go and rest in a hotel nearby. This was a very rough night, and we really need some rest, and we want to get over what we've seen. They all agree, and they got into the mystery machine and they drove away. I expected the episode to end there, but it cut to a disheveled man in a cell glaring at the floor in anger. Suddenly, a faint whisper was heard, and he looked up as his eyes widened and he gasped. There in front of him stood the real ghost. It looked just like his costume, but this one was real. He screamed and tried backing up, but the ghost lady grabbed him by the neck, and in a matter of minutes she ripped his head off. Blood splattered all over her face as she grinned, dropping the head and fading away. Then just like that, the credits rolled. Of course, I didn't believe what my friend had said at first. I thought he was just making up a stupid story, but he told me that he still had the episode recorded, and I could watch it for myself, so I went over to his house and saw it with them. The episode was exactly like he told me. I decided to write down the names of the creators that were in the intro. The creator's name was written in small letters under the show's title. Let's just call him John Doe. After viewing the episode with my friend, I told him I would try and find any information about what about 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 anything I could find. We said our goodbyes and I went into my house. Heading to my room and opening up my laptop, I typed in John Doe's name in the Google search and I came across a Wikipedia article about him. According to the article, he wasn't a very well-known animator who had worked on several bumpers and shorts for Adult Swim. Not only that, but he had a YouTube channel where he posted several surreal animations, mostly parodying famous cartoons. I looked up the channel, and most of his videos were about Scooby-Doo, making me realize he was a huge fan of it. I watched a couple and, well, they were all weird and disturbing. I checked the description, and his email was there, so I decided to email him about the whole experience. To my surprise, he responded pretty fast and quickly. I greeted him and told him what happened, and asked for an explanation. This is what he said. I had been hired to work on a Scooby-Doo reboot for Adult Swim. This reboot was supposed to be like an actual horror version of Scooby-Doo, with blood, cursing, gore, and all such. However, the day of the premiere, which so happened to be the day that your neighbor recorded the episode, a disgruntled employee who had been fired hijacked into the channel and aired the premiere episode of my reboot instead of Adventure Time, as it was a way of damaging Cartoon Network. Multiple parents sent angry emails to Cartoon Network complaining about the violent Scooby-Doo episode. This, along with several other problems, led to the show being cancelled and never meeting the light of day. With that out of the way, I asked him if there was any forum or blog where people could talk about the incident, but he responded that there was, but it was taken down by Cartoon Network since they wanted to clear this incident from their history so they wouldn't have a bad image. I looked it up, and sure enough, there was no blogs or forums talking about it. I wanted to ask him one last question, and so I did. What was your inspiration for this episode? He responded with, I used to live in a street where a wealthy couple lived at the very end of it. Their house wasn't a mansion, but it was very bigger than anyone else. One day a neighbor snuck into their house and murdered them. He escaped the neighborhood after the murder, leaving no trace behind. To this day, the police haven't found out where he was. And that's what inspired me for this episode. I thanked him for the answers and apologized that the show had been canceled because of a pissed-off employee, and said goodbye. The next day I talked to my neighbor about it, and everything was cleared up now. We decided to watch a marathon of Scooby-Doo Where Are You together after this. A month passed, and I decided to look up John Doe again, since I hadn't read his Wikipedia article to a full extent, and I was still curious about him. When I typed up his name, two shocking news reports popped up. The first one said that John Doe had been found guilty of the murder of a wealthy couple in their house, and that he had been arrested the day after I had gotten contacted with him. The second one said that he had been found dead in a cell a week after being in jail. His head had been ripped off gruesomely. And that, my little shadows, was the cancelled Scooby-Doo reboot. A Creepypasta by RS Production. Same person who made that amazing Courage the Cowardly Dog episode, and now we're being graced with yet another pretty good Creepypasta. Now let's get into my final thoughts of the story. I will be honest, the detail in the story, everything about it, was very, very, very well done. I love the description of everything that went on within the Creepypasta itself. I love that there was a bit of a separate, I guess you could say a separate paragraph and quotation marks that basically was what the neighbor kid or something, told the protagonist in the story. I loved also the fact that it seemed like a very well-made and interesting, Scooby-Doo kind of episode. I mean, everything about this entire episode, minus the blood, the gore, and the swearing, is exactly like how a freaking Scooby-Doo episode would actually go out. I mean, everything about it just screams Scooby-Doo. And it really sucks that something like this doesn't exist because, I mean, come on, people. We've had Scooby-Doo for how long now? Since the freaking 60s? How come there hasn't been an adult version of it? I mean, yes, we do have Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated, which I consider one of the best versions of Scooby-Doo out there. But even then, though, why hasn't somebody made an adult version of this? Like, nobody's made an adult reboot of this show. which honestly is disappointing, but this right here is just amazing. If somebody ever wants to find inspiration for making an animation out of this, read the story, watch the story, listen to the story. I don't care. Do what you have to do. I mean, but make sure, of course, that you ask permission first. But still, this concept right here is amazing. This honestly felt like a real Scooby-Doo episode. Everything about it just screamed it, and I loved it to frickin' death. It was genuinely very beautifully made, amazing, awesome concept, and, well, everything up to it. Now, with that being said, there was a bit of a disappointment that I did have with the story. Now, please understand me that, like I always say, it's my own opinion, but still. I guess this kind of couldn't really be, I don't know really what to say. But basically, we're getting to the point where the ending, saying that the person that the protagonist had interviewed was apparently the one who actually killed the people. But I think the ending itself was just really, why? Basically, it said, the second one said that he had been found dead in his cell a week after being in jail. His head had been ripped off gruesomely. Okay, this is where I have a problem with the story. Blending fiction with reality. This is something that, unfortunately, a lot of creepypastas tend to do. And this, unfortunately, is one of them. And this is kind of a big problem, especially given the fact that this was, one of the end. Like, the very end of it. It could have just ended simply with, him being arrested. And I would have given it a pass on that, but pretty much saying that all this stuff was pretty much happened the same exact way, in the episode. I mean, for one, why are we blending fiction and reality together? I mean, it worked so beautifully with the Scooby-Doo episode. Why in the world did it automatically have to go into real-life scenario? That's the main thing people, you people, take notes when I say this. Do not blend reality with fiction in a creepypasta. Meaning, especially with creepypasta, lost episodes, video games, or any other kind of topic. You do not want to blend the fiction and the reality together because it will ruin your story. Unless that's what the story is supposed to do. Now, I get it that this entire story is a work of fiction itself, but still, even within creepypasta stories, you always want to make sure of it that if there has to be an element of realism to it, you have to keep the fictional from reality. I know I've said it a lot, but it's the honest truth. That's the number one thing that has to be done in regards to these creepypastas. And unfortunately, it sucks to have to say that the ending was not good at all. That entire sentence, that entire little paragraph could have easily been thrown out, and then it would have been absolutely beautiful. But honestly, what I personally would have done to improve it would have, completely and utterly, cut out certain parts of the story, certain parts of the ending. For one, I wouldn't have read up deeper into the Wikipedia account, saying that he was the one that killed the people, because I kind of thought that was a bit cliche and a little bit unnecessary and be like a huge facepalm, at least to me personally. I would have cut those parts out, and I would have probably just ended this entire thing by, saying, that they watched an episode of Scooby-Doo, Where Are You together, and then, ultimately just enjoyed the rest of their lives. That right there would have wrapped it up beautifully, and it would have helped out, and it would have really brought the story up in a lot of ways. Unfortunately, that's not what the story does, though, but I'm not trying to hate on it. Despite that issue, it's still a relatively great creepypasta, and I enjoyed it a lot, despite the ending. But like I always say, this is simply my own personal opinion, and if you disagree with it, that's perfectly fine too. We're all entitled to our own opinions in regards to these creepypastas, and this is simply just my own personal thoughts. My final rating of the story will have to be an 8 out of 10. The 8 is specifically for the fact that while the story, the concept, and the episode itself was beautifully made, well crafted, and just downright awesome and kick-ass for a Scooby-Doo episode, the ending itself really fell flat. In fact, it actually did a little bit of damage to the story itself, because it just kind of went into that cliche way of, the episode actually being real. It kind of reminds me of the VeggieTales 1993 pasta, which, like I said, I didn't like that one. This one I do like, but it kind of seems to copy it. I'm not saying that the person's copying it, but I am saying that that kind of concept itself is not really it's not exactly as different from that other story and other lost episodes and other creepypastas, out there. And that's disappointing. But, of course, like I've said, my own thoughts and opinions. But what did you guys think about this creepypasta? Did you guys enjoy it? Did you guys not? Also, what would you have personally done to help make the story a lot better? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments section below. I'm the Shadow Reader, thanks again for watching, and also shout out to RS Productions for making the story. You did a very amazing job with this creepypasta, but the ending fell flat. If you improve that and work that through, it'll be an automatic 10 out of 10, but I'm sticking with the 8 out of 10 as of now. But it's perfectly fine, it's understandable. Not every piece of work in literature is always going to be amazing the second or third time you do it. I mean, look at me. Look at Patrick's Diabetes. I consider that one, especially the ending, to be absolute dog crap. But, yeah. But if you guys enjoyed this video, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe because I make brand new videos every single day. And like always, roll the outro because I'm out. In fear and surprise as your eyes widen, your mouth goes dry with each battered breath. You try to scream, your mind begs to leave. Glued to your computer screen, the killers they slash, the tapes burn and crash. The cartridge you bought will be your final haunt. The rituals of hate will seal your fate. The tears you shed will be from the fear-gripping horror-driven nightmarish gore-filled, terrorizing, hateful, burning, violent, rage-inducing, knife-slashing, blood-splattering, silent screams. Only time will tell if you will escape this online hell. Your horror-filled obsessions will come with its own regressions. Your pathetic screams will not be heeded in any way, because your nightmares will come at any